Just over 60 years ago, the BBC produced an extraordinary film which couldn't have been more critical of the Isle of Man had it tried. If you think Donald Trump was hard done to last year by the BBC, well, this short documentary, The Other Island, is a masterclass in how to destroy a country's reputation. I'm joined now by... Well, I don't know how would we describe you in this context? I'm talking to Charles Gard anyway.
Yeah, former broadcaster, I think.
Former broadcaster.
Yes.
And you have picked up on a film that was produced when I was about 3 months old.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This was back in the summer of 1965. The film was produced by the BBC, and I suppose it's topical in that it has, it received a huge amount of political criticism, and the BBC of late has been known to receive a little bit of political criticism. So tell us a little bit about the film and why you felt it was time to rediscover it.
Well, I was given a copy some years ago. I was fairly shocked when I viewed it because it was a deliberate attack on the Isle of Man. There's no question about that. And I realised that this week is actually the 60th anniversary of it being screened on a Sunday in November, to the absolute outrage of everybody across the Isle of Man. They had come over, the film crew, in the summer, and they had got lots of tourists to complain on every aspect of the Isle of Man. Fishermen are also telling us there's no men, no boats, no fish. There's someone complaining about the casino. We have an ageing population. Oh, and then it says it's not just the old people that die. Thank you. It's the TT riders as well. The opening sequence of bikes smashing into the wall in the TT and the riders being flung like rag dolls across the road, intercut with people on the one-armed bandits in the casino, is shocking. I mean, with no explanation. And I thought, well, I think really this needs to be at least available to the public. It's actually an interesting historic look. But then, towards the end, they get a tourist to say how stupid and superstitious we are, how daft that we have to say hello to the fairies. Then the smooth voiceover says the eccentric animals on the Isle of Man, we see cats with no tails and sheep with 4 horns, add to the mystery. And then we have a shot in Castletown in the Witch's Mill of the Coven meeting. Now, of course, this did happen, but it's buttocks, actually, because the very first thing we see are the rear sides of 2 men and a woman standing stark naked before they start dancing. And the BBC have added in Carmina Burana to give some more atmosphere. And I think that must be the first time buttocks were ever seen on British television. 1965 on a Sunday.
And of course, there was nothing in the film that wasn't that didn't have shreds of truth surrounding them. And yes, we know that coven existed back in the 60s. It's fair to say that the film probably showed the full extent of the people involved, which were and in more ways than one. But there were only half a dozen people in the film, if that. Out of a population back then, what would it be, about 50,000 people in the 60s?
Well, they said 50,000 in the commentary, yes.
Yeah, so it's not truly representative. It's fair to say that the TT did and still does see tragic accidents, but we also had the Reverend Cubban on saying, well, actually, compared with many sports, it's no more dangerous than going and climbing a really dangerous mountain. So, I mean, But yes, it was very interesting just to see how the politicians chose to speak. It's quite clear there was no such thing as media training back in those days.
No, and everything you've just said is absolutely true. Everything they said was as they said it, except some did complain that they were misled and that the editing was a bit egregious. The point, Phil, is that it was all negative. And if you're talking about balance in the licensed British national broadcaster, then, as I show in my little postscript, that's not how I remember 1965. The beaches were packed, and as I comment, why were hundreds of thousands of people coming here if it was so awful? Of course we had problems. Everybody has problems. You could do that today on the Isle of Man, but in fact there's a hell of a lot of good things happening. And why didn't the BBC show a balance? Because that would be boring, and somebody had an agenda. That's what it was.
And that's your theory behind all this, isn't it? That it came following hot on the heels of another important establishment, which we may or may not have a particular bias towards.
Well, we're sitting in that building at the moment, Manx Radio. Manx Radio got its licence the previous year, 1964, and first broadcast in June of that year, after a long aggravated negotiation with the British government and the BBC, who were bitterly opposed to it. So I'm wondering, as our broadcasts started, whether someone in the BBC said, look, we really don't like this competition. How dare the Isle of Man have its own radio station? What are they thinking of? Let's go over there and show the other island. Now, what does the other island mean? The other as compared to what? To the island that everybody knew and loved, that the millions of people had come here on holiday. They were going to show the other side. They were going to actually pick out the bits that were tricky and difficult and dig and find all that and put that together as a documentary. And then the Director General told us, in response to the Governor's letter of complaint, that it was made by a highly professional group of people, and no, there was no chance of another programme to put the other side. So thank you, and get back in your box.
Yeah. And of course, at the time, we were paying handsomely for the privilege of the BBC producing very negative films about the Isle of Man, and very little else. I think it's fair to say. Certainly back then. I mean, obviously the BBC now has an active wing in the Isle of Man that produces really good stuff on particularly via the internet, the website, the BBC website. So yeah, times change. Is there anything we can learn from that film, looking at that film, in relation to where we are at the moment? Because I imagine that someone could come to the Isle of Man if they had an agenda and produce a similarly negative film if they chose.
Yes, I have to hold my hands up because I'm slightly guilty. I did a slightly negative film a couple of years ago, showing, well, I suppose picking out the bits of Douglas that needed some paint and a bit of loving care. I did that, but I think it's a slightly different thing. You know, I did do a lot of positive things in that. Yes, you could go anywhere and do that, couldn't you? You could go anywhere and do it. And if you're Fox News or someone like that, then that's what you'd expect. But in Britain, we all have licences, and those licences for broadcasting require you to be balanced, and that was not balanced. And we've just seen recently the BBC being hauled over the coals for another piece of editing. And the thing that really gets me is, I mean, I love the BBC and I wouldn't be without it, but if they make a mistake, they said about President Trump's edit that it was inadvertent. Well, that's utter rubbish. How could anyone who did that inadvertently shouldn't be in the building, never mind editing Panorama? The thing that I find difficult is they cannot apologise properly. Why don't you just say, that was a terrible mistake, we're very sorry, it won't happen again? But to try and justify it, as they did with the Manx one, is just not on.
Other elements, then, going back to the film, the fishing industry. I thought, did the industry really collapse that early?
No, of course it didn't.
I'm sure I remember as a relatively small boy going along the quayside in Port St Mary and being hardly able to find anywhere to stand. There were so many barrels of
thousands of barrels. Yes.
So yeah, it did seem a bit strange. But I suppose maybe if you were the fishermen that were interviewed, looking back at the heyday of the herring fishing, you might be thinking, things aren't as good as they used to be, which they probably weren't by that stage. But if they could have moved a further 10 years hence and
Exactly.
and then looked back,
Yeah,
you'd
yeah.
have had a much starker view from the fishermen.
Well, I've managed to find some footage of that period done, all right, for tourist board promotion, so obviously they're biased as well, but they made no bones about that. And yes, there were all the ships with thousands of barrels of herring at the same time as this Manx fisherman was telling us there were no men, no boats and no fish. Well, where was he fishing? I don't know. In the Morwick Park? I don't know.
and I imagine as well, if you went down the Peel quayside and spoke to a fisherman now, they'd probably say something remarkably similar. Yes, yes, it was certainly thought-provoking, the film, and I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed the contrast between the establishment politicians and Ed Collister, who obviously was a bit of a thorn in the side of the established commissioners. He was far from happy at the idea that the ancient seat of the Dukes of Atholl. Yes. Although again, there was a bit of I don't know. It was an unusual setting for him to be. I mean, the reason he was in front of the Castle Mona was because that's where the casino was going to be. But having someone who was very clear that to declare that he was a socialist, standing in front of this palace, talking about how terrible it was to be undermining the ancient home of a lord of man who ended up whose family ended up selling us off to the British
point.
Crown.
I hadn't. Yes,
yes, it did seem.
He was almost defending something that he would have found undefensible. But if I could just say, I do occasionally hear people today saying that the current government is the worst one they've ever heard of on the Isle of Man. But I think everybody thinks that because Ed Collister, was saying exactly the same thing in 65. He said it on TV, this is the worst government the Isle of Man's ever had. So we need to get things in perspective. I don't think everything in the past was always better. I think we have these rose-tinted spectacles, and we're still saying the same things today as we were 60 years ago.
And of course, things that were happening in the early to mid-60s were quite dramatic. I mean, this was a radical shift from where we had been, which, as Mr. Colburn, the very wealthy businessman that was interviewed on the film, was stating that we'd had the two world wars, which had boosted the Isle of Man, and there was also the clarity that tourism had been the main source of income, and then some fool invented cheap flights to other parts of the world, and then all of a sudden nobody wanted to come to the Isle of Man anymore. So they kind of needed to find something else, but at the time, certainly in the 60s, a lot of Manx people were deeply uncomfortable at the move away from that more traditional way of
But what they
living.
didn't realise, as Clifford Irving stood there with the brand new sea terminal, which had only been opened the year before, behind him, was that as you were talking about tourism failing because of the flights, the Isle of Man did not introduce surtax, and that was Ronald Garvey's suggestion, which meant we had a financial advantage over the UK. And that brought here, as the Chief Minister told me the other day is happening now, people fleeing the UK to come to another jurisdiction. The wealthy people, they came and they brought with them their accountants and their advocates. And unwittingly, and it wasn't planned, our financial sector started to grow. And it's always amazed me, as one thing fades away in the island, like smuggling went away and tourism came, mining came, as they fade away, something else, touch wood, always appears. Let's hope there's something waiting to come now.
There's always hope, isn't there? And yes, and I suppose up until the 1960s, life hadn't changed dramatically, possibly for 100 years.
That's
because
right.
we'd been used to a significant amount of tourism. We'd been used to fishing and farming making up the difference, really. From 1960 onwards, we've been used to periods of significant change in the island. So, and I don't know. None of us have got a crystal ball, or maybe you have. I don't. I certainly don't.
Well, I haven't, but I think you've got to get again into context. You have to say the Isle of Man now is a success story. I keep saying that in 1982, was it, the Savings and Investment Bank crashed, and Edgar Mann told me many years later that the total reserve of the Manx government was £1 million, for heaven's sake. And he went to the Isle of Man Bank for a loan and they wouldn't give him one. What's our reserves now? 1.6 billion? Look at it. I mean, it has gone in the right direction.
And of course, context is everything, isn't it? As I noted, the UK Chancellor, shortly after she delivered her budget, was trying to put into context where things were, that this was the reason why, actually, whilst the headline rates of tax may not have gone up, tax really was going up due to a range of other reasons. But the context is, we live in a really uncertain world.
We do.
And much as how I doubt they would want to shout it from the rooftops, the UK government has to spend more on defence because of all that uncertainty.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's horrendous problems with certain people in the world who are just, bulldozing around the place, and you've no idea what direction they're going to turn.
And of course, the Isle of Man government exists in that same world and has to try and find a way through all of this. I mean, it was difficult enough at the best of times when the Isle of Man had more money, possibly thanks to the interesting VAT sharing arrangement, which did seem to benefit the island. We had more money. We were able to better represent ourselves on the world stage, and the world stage was a much easier or more understandable place,
or more stable. Wasn't it?
I mean, there were certain rules by which engagement could be done, whereas now I don't know how.
Well, you just don't know what's coming at you next.
Yeah,
you really don't.
So it was a very interesting watch, that film.
Well, I think worth putting up.
And your films are available from...
well, if you just go onto YouTube and just type in Charles Gard videos, you'll get... I've got 50 videos up there at the moment, I've just noticed.
That's very
I've been
good.
putting them up. So yes, they're there, lots of Manx stuff. So.
And other stuff too. I noted a little film about... although I was listening to... What was I listening to? There was something... Oh, gosh, I can't remember which of the many television channels that are now available, but there was an Irish, Northern Irish woman doing the announcing, and she was talking about films. The film.
Films, they always say films. Even in Republic they say films.
And we do in the island, of course. And it was just refreshing to hear films being used. So you've got 50 films. One of the films is about... I've got Donegal. That's right.
Yes. Well, I had the great pleasure. I've got lots of Irish friends because I used to live there for a few years, and I went over in the summer and stayed in their house in Donegal. And I just bought a new camera, so I was trying it out. And it's just such a fantastic place. You know it well. You've been there many times. And I just threw a little documentary together. It only lasts 15 minutes or stuff. 3 days in Donegal. And we did a lot. We saw lots of Neolithic sites and fantastic scenery and, stately homes, all that sort of stuff.
And there is so much to see, isn't
Yes.
there? And, I think sometimes we fail to recognise the history of the place in which we live. I mean, yes, we don't have the ruined temples and the amazing structures that still exist in the south of Europe, but we do have history all around us, don't we?
We absolutely do. I mean, all the hills. well, I did the Curiosities of the Isle of Man some years ago. There are so many little quirky things. I've got another one that I'm just about to upload, a bizarre stone wall I found around the back of Mackled Head, which now I've researched is really quite interesting. So there is always something to find. You can go out any day for a walk and think, oh, I wonder what that was. And there's a story there.
And a bizarre stone wall. I've seen lots of stone walls. I've never known of one called bizarre before. Why?
Well, you'll see it. It's just, you can't get your head around it. It's massive, right down on the beach in a completely inaccessible place. I could only get to it on the kayak. And you really got to think, who built this? What were you doing here? So just tune in a couple of weeks.
And do we get to find out?
Sort of, yes. I can't give you a definitive answer because it's probably dating back to the 19th century and there's no one alive who remembers it. But with various experts, mostly Pete Geddes, of course, is very helpful, and others, I've got some ideas, yes.
Good. Oh, well, I'm glad that we're not going to be left with a cliffhanger on this. Well, it's not a cliffhanger. Yes. The video production has been a part of your life, really, hasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it's the sort of thing you've done. I don't know. Well, when did you start? Yeah,
the first one was probably about 1985 when the Isle of Man Railways said to Noel Howarth that they wanted a little promotional video, and Noel came to me because I was working here, and we did the Railways of the Isle of Man. That was the first one we did, and I filmed things like the Falcon Cliff lift. Thank goodness I filmed these things because they're not there anymore. And then I got involved with Rob Rohrer. We did The Story of Man, and which is still playing in the museum 40 years later. Did all the films for the House of Manannan. And we did documentaries for BBC and Channel 4. And then when I started with what is now Culture Van, and I just made lots of films, mostly for the Department of Education, actually, because our brief, and you were chairman for quite a while, was to try and get Manx resources for the schools. And the fact that Joe Collister, who used to be in charge of all that, has now left that and gone to work at the Bund School is very worrying. I don't know if they've replaced her because she was fantastic.
Certainly, I understand that Joe is to be replaced. That was the intention, and certainly one area's loss is another one's gain.
Indeed.
I mean, it's great
yes.
that Joe has got to the Bund School and is going to be helping out that important establishment too. And actually, the film record is so much more valuable than you could have a box with 50 photographs in, and a film. And the film is always going to be more interesting.
Yes. Providing the editing isn't biased.
Well, yes. Have you ever been tempted to do a biased bit of editing?
Well, for 7 years, I was news editor here at Manx Radio. For 7 years, I was doing a current affairs programme every morning. Me and David Collister, an hour a day with all the politicians. I remember once I did interview the chairman of Manx National Heritage, and I did get a bit aggravated with him. And I met his wife in Marks and Spencer later that morning. She said, "Charles, I have to say, you're normally very fair, but I thought this morning you were really out of order." And I possibly was. It is, you must know, an act of self-restraint when you're doing it, because you personally get involved. You might get aggravated, and you can't use the interview or the film to put your own personal views across. Not when you're with a licensed broadcaster. You really have to bite your tongue and be generous to both sides.
Indeed, and it is quite hard, particularly if you come from a background like me where you've been in there and been doing stuff.
Yes, well, particularly for you, because you know the other side.
Well, yes, and then you're thinking. So the closest I get to giving a political view is I pose questions usually at the end of my my pieces, whether that be agenda.
But those who know can read into that.
Well, yes. And I do try and pose a question from each side, as best I can. But
it's only fair on the public to do that, isn't it?
Yeah. And plans for future videos or anything?
Yes, there's history videos, I've got quite a bit of stuff I've filmed. I just haven't got round to editing it, So I'll always be doing bits and pieces, I hope, while I've got breath and I can still see a camera.
You're not looking as though you're going to be short of breath soon.
Well, I hope not. No. I mean, there's so much still to do, and I just love it. That moment, I'm very lucky that I can do the camera work, because modern cameras are pretty well idiot-proof, so I just press automatic and it works. I've always done the sound, because I've worked here, and I can write my own music. And when you sit down, you've got all those elements, you can put it together. It's just heaven, being able to create. We've got wonderful scenery, wonderful pictures and everything. Sound, putting it all together. I love it.
And that music can make quite a difference too, can't it?
Very much so.
Actually, we're just about out of time now, but the editing of the film that we started talking about, the music certainly set the context for what was a hatchet job of a film.
Well, putting in Carmina Burana, I mean, that to me, for those who know that piece, is a sort of pagan, the sort of music you'd use at a pagan ceremony. They didn't have that playing on a little speaker in the background. The BBC put that in to make it look even more ridiculous. And very naughty.
And where do we go to again to see all this? Charles Gard films?
No, Charles Gard videos.
Videos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Technically, they're not films anymore, because we don't use film, we use video. So it's just YouTube and then Charles Gard videos, and all my items will come up.
That was former broadcaster Charles Gard. So what do you think? Was this the BBC getting its own back on the Isle of Man government for daring to establish Manx Radio in opposition to the BBC? You can watch The Other Island by visiting Charles Gard videos on YouTube and make your own mind up. Don't forget this programme is available as a podcast. For now, I'm Phil Gaughan. Gora Mayus on Geisachrum Carna Blina. Thanks for listening. As Nolak Genel Eru.